Okay, cool. Well, hello everybody. Hello and welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon and all that. My name is Paul Squirrel. I'm from the Network One and I'm going to be hosting and moderating today's Wednesday webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'm also joined on the call today by Julian Boulding, and Julian's here to help. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I'm going to be introducing our speaker in just a moment, but before we do that, just a few little housekeeping notes, which I'm sure you've all heard 1,000 times, so please bear with me. From a timings point of view, we are just having a short 5-minute intro. We'll follow that with 35 to 40 minutes of presentation time and a 15-minute Q&A. So the main session should end at around about 2 p.m. London time. So you've got plenty of time to go off and make a coffee before your next meeting or whatever you need to be doing. Questions? If you have any questions for our speaker, please do pop them in the chat box and we'll read them out in the Q&A session. You can message Julian and myself directly in the chat box as well if there's anything you need to let us know. We are recording this session, so there's no need to take notes. If you prefer not to, the videos will be available on our website in a few days' time to watch if you wish. Okay, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Martin Cass, Chief Marketing Officer of BBTV. Martin is one of the most talented and high-profile media agency personalities in the industry. In a 19-year stint with Cara, he led the successful P&G media business pitch, which transformed the fortunes of the agency, and he then became president of the global management team. He moved to MDC, where he grew their media assembly operation to a $100 million business. Martin joined Vancouver-based BBTV, that is now the second largest publisher of online video content in the world. Their next step is to develop their relationship with brand owners and their agencies, arguably the biggest new opportunity in our industry. Today, Martin will be discussing the rise of the creator economy and how your agency can and should start getting involved in this. So without further ado, I'd like to turn over to Martin, who joins us from the west coast of America today, where it is very early in the morning. So Martin, I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you. That's an extraordinarily generous introduction and probably completely undeserved. You can be the judge of that in about half an hour's time. Yes, I joined BBTV. Actually, I started about a year ago nearly as a consultant, and then went full time as the CMO in January. So it's been just chatting to the guys. It's been a heck of a journey in terms of what's happening. And I'm actually coming to you, if I look out my window, if I looked at my window and there was some sunlight, I could see the Hollywood sign in the background. So I'm right slap bang in the middle of the creator economy here in the United States. So perhaps it's apposite I do that. So let me just share my screen. And I am going to share the screen here. I am going to make that full screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not going to sell you BBTV. There's no point. I want to talk to you about the economy. So I'm going to give you a few slides about what we are, so you get some sense of it, and kind of the scale. Because the thing that shocked me when I first started looking at BBTV, first of all, my first thing was, what is this? And you know, as a man with kids who are Gen Z, I kind of had an awareness they spend a lot of time looking at video, but I didn't realize and really understand the power of what the digital generation is like. And when I talk about the digital generation, just so I'm clear, I'm talking about millennials and Gen Z. So these are, in Martin Sorrell's language, the digital natives. Okay, so that's who we're talking about. Okay. Why is this thing not moving on? Okay. So we are a global community of content creators, and it's a bit more than a community. We actually have 5,000 creators around the world who are contracted to us. We manage their relationships with people like YouTube and others, and we actually pay them. So that's the relationship. It's not that we are a reseller, don't go around scooping up impacts and then reselling them. So we actually have over time helped creators to grow their business. That's the most important thing to say. And we actually enable them to make their business better. And I'll you know, the business of creators is interesting, and I'll touch on that in a second. Globally now, we have about 600 million uniques a month. That's about 40 billion unique views. And that, as we said at the beginning, that makes us the second largest video producer, probably in the world actually, but certainly in on YouTube. And because we own the relationships with our creators, we know their names, addresses, bank account details, etc., we are able to segment them or virtually any way we want, but they naturally fall into, and this is naturally the way that the content falls, is in sport, and I'll touch on sport in a sec, music, gaming, entertainment and kids, so family. So that's roughly how this whole thing breaks out. The US is not the biggest, ironically, with about 107 million. India is the single biggest market that we operate in. And you can see that the volume around the world is pretty substantial. I haven't included Australia and New Zealand or anywhere else, but they're there, right? So this thing is not a local phenomenon. It is indeed an absolutely global phenomenon. So if you're calling in from Hong Kong or wherever you are, you can start to see that this isn't something that's a Hollywood-based American issue. This is very much a global transformation in the way that people operate and people get their entertainment. So I'll give you two examples. I apologize for can you all see the guy on the left? You're looking at lots of pictures on the right-hand side here. Yeah, you can see, right? Okay, so I can see the pictures. Okay, apologize for the pixelation on the right. But to give you some sense of the scale of the business, or what's going on, this guy called Tifu, right? He has double the number of Twitch followers than Fortnite does on Twitch. We'll see Azzy a few times, but she has more social followers than Cosmopolitan magazine globally. And you can think about that for a moment and think about what you think about Cosmopolitan magazine or Fortnite. You think they are absolutely enormous brands, and yet these brands, these creators actually have larger following in these relative things. So Tifu is a gamer, and Azzyland is actually, she's many things, but we'll come back to her. That content, as I said here, is becoming democratized, right? So creators becoming the power player that can actually bring audiences together wherever they have a presence. So I will talk a lot about YouTube, but Azzy and Tifu and all of these creators, they're on virtually every platform at scale. So it's not that they are just making videos for one thing, whether it's TikTok or others. They may have more of their presence on one than the other, but they certainly have a pretty strong cross-platform presence if they're good. These are substantial businesses. So when we look at these people, we think, okay, they're young individuals, but actually they're running substantial business. Most of them are funded directly by their fans. If I said to you that Mr. Beast, which is a guy, you may have heard of a brand called Ozark, which is a TV show, which is globally syndicated. Mr. Beast is substantially about 10 times bigger than the revenue of Ozark. So you're beginning to see, and many of the creators are making more money than the CEOs of many of the top media companies like NBC and so on and so forth. So these are businesses. You shouldn't think of them as kids making content. This is a real professional world. They launch games, they do all sorts of things. And the other thing I would say is where these creators go, where they draw their audiences, those fans follow them. So it doesn't matter if it's YouTube or NFTs, and NFT, I'm not going to touch it in this, but we want to ask questions about that later. NFTs and the digital Web 3.0 is going to be an enormous part of the creator economy going forward, something we're very interested in, but I haven't touched too much on the world of NFTs in this deck. So there are about 50 million creators globally. There are like 47 million who are what I would describe as amateurs. They are doing their thing. they're having a great time. They're making cat videos. They're singing. Karaoke and posting it and so on and so forth. And lots of it's on Instagram. But they're just doing it, right? So it's a very, very large long tail. There are about 2 million what I would call professional creators, mostly operating on, half of them really making their money out of YouTube. And that's driving today, the estimate is about $105 billion global economy. So it is a really substantial business you're looking at here. So, all right, that's great, but how big is it, right? So I'm now looking at the scale of this thing. So this is the first thing to say is reach. Now, most of these numbers are United States, so I do flip between the United States and global, so bear with me. I'll try and make sure I tell you when I'm going global. But nearly everybody who is aged between 18 to 29 in the US watch some of this stuff at any given time. These are YouTube stats, right? So, and half of YouTube users say they're there every single day. That's kind of crazy. That's TV numbers, right? So if you think about this, one of the things we say quite a lot when we meet clients and agencies is think of this as television for the digital generation. So it is their TV, and I'll explain a little bit how that's come about and why that's come about in a minute. If you ask teens who they trust influencers way more than they trust celebrities. So what that really means is the people like I'm showing you in this screen at the side here, if they say something to this generation, they're much more likely to trust them than they are if say a famous celeb tries to endorse something. They don't trust in the way that generations prior to this have. And they've said 50% roughly have said that they will buy something as a result of seeing something by a creator. So we have a creator down in San Diego, California, called Sam the Cooking Guy. And Sam produces once a week. He's really in his 60s, 50s. He produces a video. So it's not just young people making this stuff. He produces a video, cooking video. And every week he releases a cooking video. His reach is bigger than most of the cooking channels on TV. And he has an enormous business in selling product. So he has a whole knife range, he has a whole cookery range, spices, all sorts of things. And he's a real expert about how to actually sell off the screen without being in your face and telling you what to do. And he has I think he's got like 5 or 6 million subscribers. And then you start to get into the influence of these people in terms of doing good. So Mr. Beast, who is one of the biggest creators in the world, had a trees initiative, and he managed to, it's estimated he's had 24 million trees planted as a result of him getting into the sustainability of, we need to plant more trees, the world is dying, etc., etc. And there was a live stream by a guy called Abu Flar in the Middle East to support the refugee crisis in, it was actually Syria. And he raised $11 million just by talking about that on his channel. So you're beginning to see the degree to which these celebrities, these, whatever you want to call them, influencers, creators, are able to get people to do things. So this isn't any coincidence. And by the way, it isn't going away. And a lot of this is, I guess it's intuitive, but you have to say it, is first of all, the biggest driver has been internet penetration. So if you look at my Indian numbers, it's mobile penetration, and we'll come on to the connectivity in a sec. But in North America alone, 9% of Americans spend half their waking day with digital media of some sort. So it's massive penetration. So we've got to a point where a long time ago, the tipping point has come where you're able to get streaming. The second thing has been things like connected television. So a third of all those numbers I gave you a moment ago, so we do 107 million uniques in the United States as a business. but a third of our inventory is on CTV, which is not measured by Comscore. So that 107 million doesn't include CTV, which is a third of our impacts. So the penetration of CTV now, connected TV, as it begins to happen around the world, as people are cutting cable and cutting their mainstream supplier, that's really changing things. And we're starting to see what I would have called in the past television, or the big screen experience, coming to this world. So that's another big issue. And then the last one is the connectivity. And that's really where you see the Indian story coming to life. But as we're seeing penetration of digital devices, handheld mostly, in the hands of this generation, they're not having to worry about, are they connected to something, because they've got Wi-Fi or they have 5G. And the speeds of that and the technology that has allowed much lighter technology to distribute video content means you can get streaming pretty easily now all around the world. And as a result of that technological change, that created the environment for what I'm describing to you to happen. I'll talk a little bit about the digital generation in a moment, because the other side of the equation is, all right, well, that's great. You can have technology, you can have all of these things, but why did this start to happen? We'll get to that. The other thing that's going on, and this is a phenomenon I know that's true in Western countries. I'm not quite sure it's as true in other markets, because TV penetration wasn't necessarily as deep in some countries as it has been in Europe and the United States. But so I'm going to park that statement up front. But live TV viewership is dropping. Whichever way I cut it, it's falling. And television, in terms of broadcast television, is becoming older. And there is, this group are filling the gap behind, and they're filling it not with television. And the millennials, Gen Z, so that what I'm calling the digital generation, the ones that were born with a mobile phone or internet connection, or they certainly grew up with that and don't know any different, they are estimated to have about $20 trillion of spending power. So this is no longer wouldn't it be nice to, aren't these young children, aren't these young people interesting? They're fascinating. They're the youth of tomorrow. They're our future. These people are here right now. So the oldest of the millennials is nearly 40. So our real hotspot, and really the hot place for the creator economy, is kind of in the, although it's not measured, it's probably in the 15 to 35-year-olds. And that's where the greatest penetration of this stuff is. And this is just a descriptor of that. So this is, you're looking on the y-axis there of the percentage of audience by age. And so what you see in the red line is clearly that the television world is much older and getting older. And yet and this is our viewers, so we're just using Comscore for our own, but it's pretty representative as the market as a whole. You see that there's a big bump in amongst the 25 to 34-year-olds. So that's really where we're seeing the penetration or the profile of the media, but the numbers become important. So again, I said to you, we don't measure the 30% of our impacts that are living on CTV in this number. Well, we've got more than 50% reach of the US population, not 50% reach of the US digital population. So you're beginning to get numbers that really make an impact, and advertisers are starting to take a wake up and want to know how they're going to connect with these people. And to that point, these big numbers are starting to happen quickly. So since 2018, digital ad spend, and that's the only way I can really measure this bit, has doubled. And the digital video ad spend, whilst it's a share of that, is growing at a faster pace. So it's more than doubled. So what you're seeing is the recognition that digital video as a proportion of total digital advertising is growing, and it's growing at a pace. As advertisers are working out that they need to actually understand how to connect with this audience there, it's important they get there. Now, this chart is called influencer marketing, and I'll come back to the, a big thing that you need to think about is what's the difference between an influencer and a creator. But this is influencer marketing spend. I couldn't find one called creator marketing spend in US dollars, and you're beginning to see the speed of growth just on people who are spending in influencer, and that tends to mean not advertising. That tends to mean giving people product content and asking them to talk about their products online. So this thing's growing quite fast. I suspect this will flatten, and I'll explain that a little later. But it is a big piece of the pie. Branded entertainment sponsorships are a big piece of the pie. So this is what, I mean, these are just examples. This is what some of the numbers look like just in our verticals, and in the creator economy as a whole. You will see smaller numbers, or actually, rather, let me rephrase that. You may see bigger numbers from some of what I will call the whales, so enormous reach and numbers from individuals. Our business tends to be somewhat more in the middle. You find, Mr. Beast will maybe 50 million subscribers. It's just insane. But, in entertainment, Aziland is pretty representative. She has 13 million subscribers. When I first saw this chart and it says gaming and it says typical gamer, I go, oh, that must be what a typical gamer looks like. It isn't. That's actually his name. Strange as that may sound. Gaming is a big piece of this generation and their interest. And this guy has 12.5 million subscribers. And by the way, that's not viewers. That's people that subscribe to his channel. We are, I will tell you right now, we are mid-sized in music. We're not big. Vivo, Sony Music, Warner, they're huge. But even now, with our subscribers, something like Diplo is 2.4 million. And these are the averages here. I touched on, I think I mentioned that we have a relationship with the NBA. We actually do a lot of work with media owners. So as media owners are getting wise to this, the NBA is an interesting case history. So this guy, Chris London, has 2.4 million subscribers, nothing particularly exciting there. But on a weekly reach basis, our Playmakers group, which is about 30 creators, has a greater weekly reach than the NBA does. So think about that for a moment. So what this is loads of videos all about the NBA and what's happening. The NBA have licensed a deal whereby these particular people have access to content, so they can have the dunk of the day or shot of the day or block of the day, all those sorts of things. And they produce their own content in and around it. And they're producing on average 1 to 2 videos a week. So it's a pretty prolific group. And the reach of that group is bigger than the reach of the NBA itself. So the creator economy around the NBA, and they recognize it as being important, is larger than the actual content being produced by the NBA and being pushed out on a commercial basis. That's I think that's fascinating when I first saw that. And the kids and family, it's an enormous group for relatively small numbers of subscribers. It's not quite so specific. All right, so that's enough about the stats and the facts, and we'll touch on a few more. And as I said, this is not going to be a hugely long presentation. I'm very happy to answer questions. So what does it mean? And I think what's interesting to me, having come from your world, frankly, into this, has been as I've traveled amongst agencies and I've traveled around brands, has been this, which is they know it's happening. They're very aware of it. They kind of look at some of those stats, but they've had their fingers burned and they don't really understand how to engage this audience because it's different. And it is a very, very different group of people. This lady is the head of the practice at IRI, so the research company in segmentation and survey. And she says, it's a challenge to build loyalty amongst a generation whose digital prowess enables them to constantly discover and experiment, and who value the freedom to continually reinvent themselves. And when I saw that, I went, yeah, that's actually the real issue here. You have a generation which is extraordinarily different to the ones that most marketers, most media owners, and most agencies have dealt with. And yes, the millennials behave, certainly the older millennials behave a lot more like the generations before them. But when you start to talk about Gen Z, who are in their 20s, so they have proper spending power, and when you talk about Alpha, which is following on behind, they literally are a different beast. It's I said to Julian when I first was chatting to him earlier, this is like landing on Mars in some ways when you meet them. Their attitudes, their motivations are extraordinarily different. Now, I explained a little bit about what one side of the equation has been, which has powered that, which is the digitization, the ability to search everything, to share everything. But it's actually that has allowed this generation to be extraordinarily skeptical about brands, how brands fit into their lives, and how brands talk to them. The average, this is a total, the average number of people, of number of social media accounts against this group is 8.5, right? Average. So you have 8.5 personas to one physical person. That's insane if you think of it. Just think about that for one moment, right? So that means you've got Facebook, Insta, TikTok. So it's this proliferation of where do I get my information from? What is shaping the culture that I live in? How do I understand that culture? And what do I believe and who do I trust? So those sets of values are being shaped in very, very different ways to the ones that the generations prior to these had. And actually, frankly, the way that marketers have built their model of influence, and it's not the same anymore. So I've used this this extraordinarily powerful chart many times recently, and it seems to have got some traction. So let me explain it. I look at that, and with my English accent, I will say that's a tomato. And my American friends will go, no, Martin, that's a tomato. And the reason I put that up there is I think what we've got is a situation where many marketers, agencies, and brands look at that and they say tomato. And yet the digital generation are looking at exactly the same thing, but they do not use the same language. They do not see the same thing that I and you potentially are looking at this thing see, and they say tomato. And we look at each other and we are not looking at the same thing, and yet we're not really understanding what we are saying to each other. So no surprise when we write content and we make things that we think is for a tomato, it is landing on deaf ears because they don't hear it like that or see it like that. So that's just the analogy I would give you. I think has worked reasonably well. People understand. And what you get is this, what we call the slippery versus sticky dilemma. Brand communications amongst this group increasingly are becoming slippery. They don't take any notice. So they're ignored at best. I can give 100 different versions of this, but the one I'll just give you is you can launch, and this is an entertainment company, right? So you can launch a trailer for a movie, and that trailer will hit. Let's make it up. Let's take a big movie. Let's take Top Gun, which is coming out in a few weeks' time. That Top Gun will be released, and probably 30 or 40 million people will have looked at it on YouTube, and they look at it once. Something like 10 times the number of people will start clicking on things like top 10 things you didn't know about Tom Cruise's stunts. They will look at content that is about Top Gun, Tom Cruise, and Kelly McGillis, and all those things. They will click on that content and look at that almost 10 times the volume as they'll look at the actual video. So they are starting to get, they want to know more about the backstory. They want to know more about what happens. Let's look at the stunts he does. So they're interested. And in fact, they're fascinated. But they'll take one look at the video and go, yeah, that's fine. It's all too glossy. It doesn't, it's fine. It's nice. I like it. I'm going to go to the movie, but that doesn't bother me. So we spend millions of dollars making the content to be cut, and they do multiple different shoots when they're shooting the movie to ensure they've got the B-roll to make the trailer, and yet it just doesn't stick. And you hear again and again and again from brands that they spend phenomenal amounts of money making content that put on their YouTube channels, and their YouTube channels just don't work. And that example of the NBA, where yes, the NBA, the content, the actual games are less viewed than the stuff that's talked about by the creators. That's a pretty good indication that, yes, the game is exciting, but it's the whole story around the game that is actually way more interesting. They learn in a very, very non-linear way. How they absorb information is entirely different to the way that generations before did. So advertising is really challenged against this group. And you kind of need an and, right? So a lot of people look at this and say, digital media produces an enormous amount of data. And we can understand all of what's going on by analyzing, modeling, producing algorithms to give us a definition of exactly how this group think. Now, we're sitting just ourselves. We have metadata on pretty much every video we've released in the last 5 years. We have about, and this has got a lot of zeros, it's 13 terabytes of data sitting on our database. So we can look at, literally everything about every video. But that in itself doesn't really explain what's going on. What you need to do that is merge that with qualitative understanding. You need to understand what creators are thinking. And the reason you need to understand what the creators are thinking rather than what the audiences are thinking is that because the creators themselves are creating that culture. So Azilan, when she goes out and talks about her life or gaming or movies, she is actually, we use that word influence is used a lot, but she's actually creating the culture and the way that these people think. And you need to understand what they are thinking. So if you're a brand, you really need to get a grip of, all right, so let's say we're Gillette. What is it that these people who are writing about male grooming, what is it they're thinking about? Why is it that they're talking about certain types of male grooming in some parts of the world, not in others? And yes, you can go and talk to consumers, which is the traditional way of doing it. But the challenge with that is those consumers are being, as you saw earlier, are being influenced by these people. So actually, if you can understand what these people are thinking and what they're writing about, combine that with the data to understand behavior, then you've got a pretty interesting approach to understanding and unraveling a little bit how this generation thinks and behaves in communication. Last few things. First thing to be very wary of, and I touched on this earlier, is the difference between a creator and an influencer. We are doing a pretty substantial amount of work at the moment to try and codify the difference. There are many, many, many extraordinarily good creators producing fantastic content that is influential, but they are not a commercial influencer. In fact, they have no interest in being a commercial influencer. They don't want to be one, and they're not that bothered by it, but they have a lot of influence. There are people that call themselves influencers that are, and the big word of warning against that group, completely inauthentic. And the moment you become inauthentic in this space, the audience sniff you out. And if they sniff you out, they cut you off. So, there's been a rise of companies like Hashoff. You've obviously heard Kim Kardashian spending, you can give her $1 million and she'll tweet for you, and that's about it. There's lots of things going on. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that it's a bad thing. All I'm warning you is if it's not authentic and doesn't appear to be authentic, it generally doesn't work. And the reason that creators with these big audiences are so wary of brands in many cases is because if it doesn't fit into their narrative, if the brand is forced into that narrative, actually it's worse for them. And, the life of a creator is, the very good ones can last a long time, but a lot of them will be like fireworks. They will become very influential, very big, huge audience. because they're creating the zeitgeist of the moment. But slowly they wear out. They have nothing more to say. And unlike a TV show that's got nothing more to say, that was made and it's still being pushed out in reruns and everything else at a certain time and gets an audience, the audience goes away. These audiences just disappear very, very quickly. So a creator that starts to get things wrong by trying to make money by too much of an influencer, trying to push things, they die very quickly and their business goes away. And as I said, some of these, we have many players on our network are making over $1 million a year. And we have some that are making tens of millions of dollars a year. And they're the ones that understand that delicate balancing act about how you ensure that what a difference between a creator and influencer is. So be careful of people coming to you telling you, I can give you an influencer campaign. Because if it's inauthentic, it doesn't work. And so let me give you an example. I threw this in literally 40 minutes ago, so we'll see. I don't know whether any of you have heard of Joe Exotic, Big Cat Rescue, and the drama between a woman called Carol Baskin and this guy called Joe Exotic, who was in the. There's been a documentary made about it, and subsequently a streaming TV show about it, which is got done very, very well. I think it's either Netflix or Amazon, doesn't matter. This lady, Carol Baskin, is the founder of Big Cat Rescue. She's one of our creators. And she understands that her bag is not to make money for herself, it's to make money to, her mission in life is to prevent wild animals being in the hands of private individuals. You can make your own minds up about Carol Baskin. But what I will say to you is, she is unbelievably influential against the audiences she talks to. She's very polarizing, but she is also unbelievably good at raising money for Big Cat Rescue and getting people to sign petitions and so on and so forth. And she's used her YouTube channels and other things to really promote that. And she's one of our creators that is involved in talking about making games. And I'll just touch on gaming for a moment. Gaming is a piece of our business that came about because one of our creators said, hey, my fans, I think, would like a game. It was a guy called Fernan Flu. Fernan Flu is a Salvadorian creator with about 6 million following. And he said, I think it'd be cool to make a game. What do you think? And our guys went, sure, that sounds like a good thing to do. So we made Fernan Flu a game. I'm not going to belabor the game because the game is pretty basic, but it has 619,000 positive reviews online. So millions of downloads. We have delivered now, because someone like Carol can say, or Fernan can say, hey, you should get my game. We've delivered 1 billion advertising impressions on our gaming platform without a single dollar of marketing expenditure, just by our creators saying, hey, you should have my game, and people downloading it in the App Store. So these people have real influence. One of the areas that's getting very interesting is NFTs, the potential to mint NFTs to create something to do good in this case. Potentially you can do good by supporting Big Cat Rescue, and there are many other causes around the world that NFTs I think can help support. And certainly the world of NFTs, rather than think too much about the Bored Ape Yacht Club and crypto punks, look beyond the froth. And it's the reason that the creator economy is getting interested is because actually what it does is create a link to your community and allows you to connect to your community in ways you couldn't connect before, as well as getting some privacy around your data and ownership of your own stuff and IP protection. So it's just an aside. So I hope that was helpful. I'll leave you with these kind of few thoughts. First of all, I hope you've got this creator economy is a real thing. It's not the froth that I guess in my previous life was like, yeah, it sounds cool. It's global. It is truly a global phenomenon, and it's global because of the technology changes and the connectivity changes that we've seen all around the world. Information is abundant, it's social, it's searchable, and it's always on. And as a result, this generation of 15 to 34-year-olds, they just do not accept commercial messaging in the same way as the previous one. And so you'll be so careful about how you make ads. You've got to be so careful about where you put them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a critical piece. Clients are taking notice. There's no doubt about that. It's ironic. I have more incoming than I have outgoing conversations. So clients saying, "Hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that?" You've got to understand that this generation is very different. And you've got to also accept that the difference between content that a creator makes and content that you make is going to be, one's going to be slippery and one's going to be sticky. The question is, how unslippery can you make your content? And that's it. I hope that was useful.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. Really appreciate that. Absolutely brilliant. And as the owner of 2 teenagers, I hope you've improved my parenting skills a little bit by giving me an insight into how their minds work. But anyhow,
I'm not sure about that.
we'll try. We've had some questions that come in, so if I could maybe just push those over to you that have come in the chat. We've got one here. What's the business model for influencer agencies? Who pays them? The brand, the media platform, their fans, or all of the above?
So I don't know exactly how influencer agencies operate. So there are multiple revenue streams that come into a creator. First one is the biggest one is advertising revenue. So, their content reaches vast numbers of people. We can monetize that for them. They get a share of revenue. YouTube take their cuts, like a tax. And there's a share of revenue after that. So the more audience they build, the greater the amount of money they make. So they can make substantial amounts of money doing that. They can make money out of branded entertainment. Some of them do this, some don't. And they can be paid for putting things into their content. So just the same way as you think of product placement, but it's, again, I said, the good ones are really good at it, and they are very, very skilled at making sure that anything that, well, first of all, they'll only accept things that are relevant to them and can authentically be part of their content. If it's inauthentic, they generally say no. So there's that. They can be paid to do that. And they do, sometimes they do appearances. They will go live and they'll appear at things. And I was saying to you before we came on air or live, it's like gonna see some of these influencers turn up in some of these events. There's a thing called VidCon, where tens of thousands of young teenage people are screaming. It's something like the Beatles in the 1960s. They're mobbed by these people. These people are their heroes, and they are like they're like the next generation of pop stars, but they're not doing pop, right? They're not. They're talking about their life and how they live, but they're heroes, and they can do appearance things like that. How influencer agencies that do influencer get paid, I don't have an opinion because we don't do that, but I suspect that they're getting paid on a here's a package, we're going to give your product to 10 people and they're going to show it. The risk, of course, is people that do it. If they do it and they're just doing it for the money, this group sniffs them out very quickly. So it's a tough world to be in.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. Someone else has written, do creators have agents, as say like a film star would do?
Oh yeah, the big ones certainly do. So we have we and there are other people doing this, but we have about 150 people every day seeking out the next creator. So we have like a talent agency internally, and then for our top creators, so the top 300 or so who are the biggest producers, we have what's called a VIP team who spend their time literally helping them, working with them about commercial opportunities or not, and so on and so forth. And many times we're not talking to the creator, we're talking to the creator's agent, and they have their own agent. Some of them run their own business themselves, and they are extraordinarily savvy at doing it. And they won't do things they don't want to do. They know their power. They understand their level of power. And yeah, some have proper, CAA type agents.
Cool. Someone else has written, I think this is sort of slightly connected actually, but how do agencies go about spotting a good creator probably before they become recognized by most other people?
You really want the answer? I was actually with a very well-known multinational holding company agency 2 days ago. Said, "Oh, we're going to build a creator network," and I thought, "Well, good luck with that. It's taken us 17 years." There are certain things that indicate creators as you see them online. There are certain things that indicate that they're going to be successful or could be. If you want to take your money and see if you can make it, there was a thing called the Grand National in the UK the other day. My money is just shove it on a horse and see what happens. It's probably more successful than trying to spot talent in the digital world. So my instant reaction is don't, because you'll spend a lot of time and energy and you'll cry a lot. And then the other problem is, how do you do it at scale? Because it's all very well having one, but that's not really very helpful. There are companies out there valued at over $1 billion who are trying to build networks of creators, and they have like 200 or 300. It's not easy. So I would not try and do that, but that's up to the agency. If they fancy the idea, go for your life. Luck.
Give you a call.
If you're public, let me know your stock number and I'll short the hell out of you.
We've got another question here. Someone has written, China is a big innovator in this space. Do you also look at what's happening in China? Anything you see there that will hit the West soon, in your view?
Yes and no. China is a very hard market to make money in externally. For the reasons everyone in the agency business knows, it's the same in the media business. We have a lot of our creators have a lot of reach in China. We don't have that many Chinese creators because we don't have a business that's actively recruiting over there. The trends you see are actually, they're global trends. They're not particularly one or the other. Japan's actually a very interesting place for a lot of these trends as well. It's not necessarily geo/cultural differentiation. The democratization of content is a lot driven by the technology and the penetration of 5G has made this a pretty democratic world when it comes to content. Some of the blocking of content that you see in some markets where you just can't see it, Middle East and others, where there's quite high degrees of censorship. And ironically, and it's very sad, but we have a big business in Russia and the Ukraine. So I say big business with a lot of creators in Russia and the Ukraine. And it will be a case study of what happens when those things get turned off. Not one that particularly is not a particularly nice thing, but it's happening. So we live in that geopolitical world. So what I would say to the absolute question, there are probably trends coming out of China there, but there are trends coming out of elsewhere. I don't think there's anything that we're seeing that's got massively different to elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Someone else has written, do creators consciously create for a global audience?
Wow, that's interesting. They create in language. So, we are in 32 different languages that we support. I mean, we're in many more languages than that, and dialects. So we actually support our creators in 32 languages. Biggest ones obviously is English, Arabic and Portuguese are very big for us too. They write for themselves actually, mostly. And that's why it's so fascinating about how they are influencing culture, because they write about what they're interested in, which is why I said you should take a lot of notice of them. They write about what they're interested in the world, and then expose that to whoever wants to be interested in it. And then they write about things that are specific. So the gaming world is interesting. I mean, how about this? This is such a strange thing to me because I'm not a gamer, but people will sit and watch someone commentate on a game and how the game is being played or how they are playing that game for 30 or 40 minutes, and they'll get a couple of million people watching it. And that to me, that's like, wow, that was a bigger, like, okay, so you're literally sitting there commentating on what you're doing in the game and telling people what's happening, and the screen is the game, and you can't see the gamer, you can just see what he's talking about. And that might be a 40-minute stream, goes on for a long time, and that's it. And sometimes you look at it and you go, I've forced myself to watch them, and I'm thinking, well, they must be telling you how to do the game and hints and tips to be better at it. No, they're just commentating. And you get some of the big commentators are literally, they're commentating on life, and they're just talking about their life and what happens. There's a creator at Penn State University who is really successful. She's got about 1 million followers, and all she does is talk about what she does at Penn State University. So the things that we think are interesting are interesting to them and therefore interesting to other people. I don't think necessarily they're sitting there trying to write for other people.
Fascinating. Makes you wonder if you're in the right line of business.
Well, here's the thing. So the under 26 years old in the United States, when asked what was the career that you would most aspire to, the single largest job they wanted to aspire to was to be a creator on YouTube.
Wow, there you go. I've just got one last question. Save this one for you. So if brand messaging can't be forced into creators, meaning influencers become more inauthentic, is the role for agency creators, writers, and art directors, etc., is there a role for them at all?
So advertising is still very effective, right? So there's no doubt that I've always tried to make very clear, I think this is an and world, not an all world. So the advertising of services and products that you guys who create advertising content, that still, it has a role. And the audiences of creators are, whilst they're skeptical, they still take notice, right? So they're not as easily influenced as my generation was, right? Oh, I saw an ad, I'm going to go and buy some. It must be good. Washes whiter whites and all that kind of stuff. That still works. It just doesn't have the same, or necessarily the same effect as it did before. Now, some people are cracking that code and getting really good at it, and some people aren't. So, I know for a fact that Procter are spending a lot of time working out, okay, well, how does this work? And they're very good at decoding some of these things. So don't make the mistake. And if I've come across as advertising doesn't work, that's entirely untrue. Getting to the audiences, which is why I showed those TV numbers, is very hard if you're going to be a TV-centric world. So placing ads in YouTube and stuff in the right content still works. And we've got 1 million pieces of work over the years that said those TV shows that you especially choose to watch have a much greater recall of the advertising than those that you don't. These people have huge subscriber networks. They watch the content very quickly. It's like especially choose to watch television for a digital generation. So advertising going away against that group. Don't fall off your chair thinking this is all doom and gloom. If you are going to go into a world where you're going to do that and you want to think about how to use these creators potentially to help you, then think very, very carefully about how you do that. Because I think there is no better way of screwing it up than you make an advertising campaign that's very clear about what the product benefits are, the features and benefits that are useful and interesting to a consumer, because it washes the clothes better, or it tastes better, or it's more available, or whatever those features and benefits are. Don't then mistake, okay, I can amplify that by giving this thing to a creator, who goes into a fast food restaurant, your advertiser says, this stuff tastes like dirt. It's horrible, because they will. Because if they tell you it tastes fantastic and their followers all go there and it tastes like dirt, trust me, they won't last long. So, you can't just, like in product placement, or on brand entertainment on TV, just get it in the script and it's scripted. And those TV shows aren't trusted like these people. They're not trusted like that. And so be careful, because if it's inauthentic and you push it and you force it, first of all, the creators should say no. But secondly, you can do more harm than good.
Right, gotcha. Cool. I'm just conscious, Martin, we're very much nearly out of time. So I'd like to offer up our very sincere thanks for your time early this morning. Really appreciate it. Absolutely wonderful presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, really, really great. And I'd like to thank everybody else for joining us as well. And if we've had a few questions that are coming we haven't been able to ask, so I do apologize for that. We're simply out of time. But if you'd like to get in contact with Martin, you can do so by email. His email address is mcass@bbtv.com. And Martin will be available to answer. So once again, thank you, Martin, very much for your time. We do appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you all for coming to our Wednesday webinar. Our next one is actually linked to this. It'll be next month. It's actually on NFTs, and we'll be showing you how to harness this innovation of the moment for agencies and clients. We'll be joined by tech experts Sarah Lynn and Kurt Schreiber from VSA, again in the States, on the 18th of May at 1 p.m. UK time. And you can register online on our website at thenetwork1.com/webinars. You will also find previous recordings of previous webinars up there as well if you want to watch them over a lunch hour, and this one will be up there in a day or two. So if you've missed anything, you can catch up again. So once again, thank you very much, Martin. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we wish you all a good day, good evening, and all the rest. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martin. Great.